Imagine you are standing on the shimmering tarmac of Andersen Air Force Base on the island of Guam. It is the undisputed crown jewel of American power projection in the Pacific. Lined up in perfect, immaculate rows are the titans of the United States Air Force, B-1B Lancers, B-2 Spirits, and the massive, iconic B-52 Stratofortresses. For 30 years following the end of the Cold War, this piece of real estate was considered untouchable. It was the ultimate sanctuary. From this tiny dot in the Marianas, American strategic bombers could launch, loiter over the South China Sea, project devastating, civilization-ending power across the Asian continent, and return home in time for dinner. But if you look closely at the sky to the west today, that sanctuary is an illusion. In the highly classified war games conducted by the Pentagon, the scenario always begins the exact same way. If a high-intensity, peer-to-peer conflict erupts over Taiwan or the Philippine Sea, the sky above Guam will instantly fill with the re-entry vehicles of the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force. Specifically, the DF-26 Intermediate-Range Ballistic Missile. The weapon explicitly designed, built, and named by the Chinese military as the Guam Killer. In the opening 20 minutes of World War III, those immaculate rows of American bombers would be vaporized on the ground. The massive aviation fuel tanks would detonate. The runways would be cratered into useless, jagged concrete. The crown jewel of the Pacific would be reduced to a burning, radioactive cinder before a single American aircraft could even spool up its engines. The United States military recognized this terrifying mathematical reality. They realized that their primary staging ground had become a death trap. They needed a new home. They needed a sanctuary that was far enough away to be immune to a sudden, preemptive missile barrage, but close enough to unleash hell on the Chinese fleet. They looked south, across thousands of kilometers of ocean, past the archipelago of Indonesia, to the vast, unforgiving and fundamentally untouchable red dirt of the Australian continent. They found their new fortress, and they are currently pouring billions of dollars into the outback to ensure that the American bomber fleet never gets caught on the ground again. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are analyzing the most significant geographic relocation of American strategic air power in the 21st century. Here is the thesis for this episode. In the era of hypersonic weapons and long-range ballistic missiles, distance is the only armor that matters. An island is a target, a continent is a fortress. If you are beginning to understand why the true balance of geopolitical power relies on the brutal, unsentimental mathematics of geography and heavy engineering, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the diplomatic pleasantries to bring you the cold, kinetic realities of how the free world is actively preparing for great power conflict. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. For the last decade, the narrative out of Beijing has been one of supreme confidence. They believed they had solved the American problem. By building an impenetrable umbrella of anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, weapons, they believed they had successfully pushed the United States Navy and Air Force out of the first island chain, and effectively neutralized the second island chain. But authoritarian regimes frequently underestimate the adaptability of democratic alliances. We are going to break down the death of Guam's monopoly, the technical reality of the DF-26 missile that forced the United States to abandon its comfort zone. We are going to explore the $1.5 billion fortress, the staggering, massive expansion of RAAF Base Tindal in the Northern Territory, proving this is a permanent militarization, not a temporary exercise. We will analyze the missile truck doctrine, how the ancient B-52 bomber remains the deadliest weapon in the sky by refusing to fly into enemy airspace. And finally, we will look at the unreachable geography, why the sheer size and depth of Australia creates an insurmountable targeting nightmare for the Chinese military. Let us begin by confronting the brutal, uncomfortable truth about the vulnerability of America's traditional island bases, the sitting ducks of the Pacific. To understand why the United States Air Force is suddenly obsessed with the Australian outback, we must first conduct a forensic autopsy of their previous strategy. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century and the first 2 decades of the 21st century, the American posture in the Indo-Pacific was heavily concentrated. It relied almost entirely on a handful of massive, highly developed mega-bases. Kadena Air Base on the Japanese island of Okinawa, and Andersen Air Force Base on the U.S. territory of Guam. This strategy of concentration made perfect logistical and financial sense in a unipolar world. It is much cheaper and more efficient to pile all of your maintenance crews, your munitions bunkers, and your spare parts into a few massive, centralized locations. For decades, the United States operated with absolute impunity. The Chinese military simply did not possess the technology, the range, or the precision to strike these bases. American bombers could sit on the tarmac, wingtip to wingtip, without a care in the world. But the Chinese Communist Party is a learning organism. They studied the American way of war during Desert Storm in 1991 and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. They realized that the United States fights by building up a massive mountain of logistics at secure forward bases, and then unleashing overwhelming air power. Beijing's strategic planners realized that they could never out-dogfight the Americans in the air. So, they decided to destroy the airplanes while they were still on the ground. They initiated the most aggressive, well-funded ballistic missile development program in human history. The PLA rocket force was born. Initially, China developed short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs, that could blanket the island of Taiwan. Then they developed medium-range ballistic missiles, MRBMs, like the DF-21, capable of hitting Okinawa and the Japanese home islands. Suddenly, Kadena Air Base was no longer a sanctuary, it was a frontline trench. The US realized that parking high-value assets like strategic bombers in Okinawa was suicidal. So they pulled the bombers back to Guam. Guam is located roughly 3,000 kilometers from the Chinese coast. For a brief period, that distance provided safety. The DF-26 Guam Killer. But the illusion of safety in Guam was violently shattered with the public unveiling and rapid mass deployment of the Dongfeng 26, DF-26, Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile, IRBM. The DF-26 is a technological terror. It is a solid-fueled road-mobile missile. This means it is not sitting in a fixed, easily targetable silo. It is mounted on a massive, multi-wheeled transporter erector launcher, TEL. It can hide in the deep, subterranean tunnel networks of the Chinese mainland, drive out into a clearing, elevate, fire, and disappear back into the mountain before American satellites can formulate a counterstrike. Most importantly, the DF-26 has an estimated operational range of 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers. Draw a circle around the Chinese coastline with a radius of 4,500 kilometers. Guam sits dead center inside that lethal threat ring. The DF-26 is highly accurate, carrying a massive conventional or nuclear payload. But the true threat is not a single missile, it is the mathematics of the swarm. China has built hundreds of these launchers. In the opening hours of a conflict, the PLA rocket force is doctrinally prepared to launch a massive, coordinated saturation strike. They would rain dozens, perhaps hundreds, of DF-26 missiles down on Andersen Air Force Base simultaneously. Even with the deployment of advanced American air and missile defense systems like THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or the Aegis Ashore system, the sheer volume of incoming hypersonic reentry vehicles would inevitably overwhelm the interceptors. The defenses would run out of bullets long before the Chinese ran out of missiles. The United States Air Force looked at this grim calculus and accepted the uncomfortable reality. Guam's monopoly as the untouchable hub of Pacific air power was dead. If the US wanted to maintain a credible, survivable strategic bomber force in the Indo-Pacific, they had to move. They had to find a location that was physically outside the maximum range of the DF-26. They had to go to Australia. Militarizing the outback. When you look at a map of the Australian Northern Territory, you are looking at one of the most sparsely populated, deeply isolated environments on the planet. It is a landscape defined by extreme heat, wet season monsoons, and endless tracts of ancient red dirt. Located approximately 320 kilometers southeast of the coastal city of Darwin sits a town called Catherine. And just outside that town lies RAAF Base Tindal. For decades, Tindal was a relatively quiet, secondary fighter base. It hosted a squadron of Australian F/A-18 Hornets, and later F-35A Lightning IIs. It was functional, but it was not designed to handle the heavy, civilization-ending hardware of the United States Strategic Bomber Fleet. But the geopolitical earthquake in the Pacific has transformed Tindal into the most critical construction site in the Southern Hemisphere. The United States and Australia are not just upgrading a runway, they are executing a massive, $1.5 billion militarization of the outback. When the news broke that the United States was planning to forward deploy up to 6 B-52 Stratofortresses to Australia, it was often framed by the media as a mere training exercise. A rotational deployment. The physical infrastructure currently being poured in concrete tells a very different, much more permanent story. To host a B-52, a massive 8-engine Leviathan with a wingspan of 185 feet and a maximum takeoff weight of nearly 500,000 pounds, you cannot simply park it on a standard tarmac. It will crush the asphalt. The $1.5 billion investment is funding the construction of massive, heavily reinforced concrete aprons specifically engineered to bear the immense structural footprint of fully loaded, fully armed B-52 bombers. They are expanding and lengthening the primary runways to ensure these massive aircraft have the necessary distance to lift off in the sweltering, thin air of the Northern Territory summer. But runways are useless without logistics. The infrastructure of permanence. The true indicator of permanence at RAAF Base Tindal is the fuel and the facilities. A single B-52 bomber holds over 300,000 pounds of aviation fuel. To support a continuous rotation of up to 6 of these aircraft, and to prepare for the possibility of surging dozens more in the event of a high-intensity war, Tindal requires a localized ocean of jet fuel. The construction plan includes the excavation and building of massive, hardened aviation fuel storage bunkers. These are not standard commercial tanks. They are designed to survive the blast overpressure of near misses, ensuring that even if the base comes under attack, the lifeblood of the bomber fleet remains secure. Furthermore, the United States is entirely funding the construction of a dedicated squadron operations facility. This is a highly secure, classified command and control bunker where American pilots, intelligence officers, and mission planners can receive targeting data from satellites, brief highly classified strike profiles, and coordinate directly with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii, all from the safety of the Australian interior. Adjacent to this operations facility, massive maintenance structures are rising from the dirt. The B-52 is a 60-year-old airframe. It requires an intense, constant level of mechanical support. Building permanent maintenance hangars in Tindal proves that the U.S. Air Force does not intend to fly these bombers back to Louisiana or North Dakota every time an engine needs servicing. They are building a self-sustaining, sovereign American strike hub on Australian soil. This is the manifestation of the Agile Combat Employment, AC, Doctrine. The U.S. Air Force is dispersing its assets away from the massive, vulnerable targets like Guam, and spreading them out across a network of highly resilient, hardened bases. RAAF Base Tindal is no longer an Australian outpost. It has been officially drafted as the southern anchor of the American strategic deterrent. The 60-year-old arsenal ship. When the public hears that the United States is deploying the B-52 to deter a modern, highly advanced superpower like China, there is often a sense of confusion. The B-52 Stratofortress is ancient. The last airframe rolled off the Boeing assembly line in 1962. It was designed before the invention of the microchip. Its massive, swept wings, its towering tail fin, and its 8 smoky engines make it one of the largest radar cross-sections in the sky. To a modern Chinese air defense radar, a B-52 looks like a flying barn. Critics ask, how can a 60-year-old non-stealthy bomber survive in the most heavily contested hyperlethal airspace on the planet? If a B-52 flies anywhere near the Chinese mainland, or the fortified artificial islands in the South China Sea, it will be instantly targeted and shot down by advanced surface-to-air missiles like the HHQ-9. The answer is brutally simple. The B-52 will never fly into contested airspace. It doesn't have to. The mission profile of the B-52 has fundamentally evolved. It is no longer the carpet bomber of the Vietnam War, dropping unguided gravity bombs over the jungle. It is no longer the low-level penetrator of the Cold War. Today, the B-52 is a missile truck. It is a massive high-altitude arsenal ship. The value of the B-52 lies in its sheer, uncompromising payload capacity. It can carry a staggering 70,000 pounds of mixed ordnance. When a B-52 takes off from the sweltering runway at RAAF Base Tindal, its bomb bays and its massive underwing pylons are not loaded with dumb bombs. They are packed with the most advanced, stealthy, long-range precision standoff munitions in the American inventory. The Jaisamir Swarm. To understand how Tindal changes the balance of power, we have to look at the weapon the B-52 will be carrying, the AGM-158B Jaisamir, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range, and its anti-ship variant, the RAASM, Long-Range Anti-Ship Missile. The JSSMER is a highly intelligent, autonomous, stealthy cruise missile. It features advanced radar-absorbent shaping, making it incredibly difficult for Chinese air defenses to detect. Most importantly, it boasts an operational range of roughly 1,000 kilometers. Let us wargame the missile truck Doctrine from Australia. A conflict erupts in the Taiwan Strait. Chinese naval forces push out into the Philippine Sea to establish a blockade. A squadron of 4 B-52s launches from the secure, untouchable sanctuary of RAAF Base Tindal in the Northern Territory. They climb to 40,000 feet and fly north over the Arafura Sea and the Celebes Sea. They are flying in completely friendly, uncontested airspace, protected by a screen of Australian F-35A stealth fighters and airborne early warning aircraft. They approach the edge of the first island chain, perhaps sitting in the airspace east of the Philippines. They are still 1,000 kilometers away from the Chinese fleet. They are completely outside the range of Chinese land-based air defenses, and beyond the reach of Chinese carrier-based fighter jets. The B-52s open their bomb base. In a matter of seconds, 4 bombers unleash a synchronized, devastating swarm of up to 80 JSSMER and RASM stealth cruise missiles. Once the missiles drop off the pylons, the B-52s bank hard, turn around, and fly back to the safety of the Australian outback to rearm. They were never in danger. But the missiles are now flying autonomously, skimming just feet above the wave tops, communicating with each other via secure data links. The swarm approaches the Chinese fleet. The Chinese Type 055 cruisers and Type 052D destroyers are suddenly overwhelmed. They are facing an influx of 80 highly stealthy, maneuvering threats arriving simultaneously from multiple vectors. The combat computers of the Chinese ships cannot process the targets fast enough. Their vertical launch magazines are rapidly depleted. The swarm punches through the exhausted defenses, slamming 1,000-pound penetrator warheads into the hulls of the Chinese carriers and amphibious assault ships. The fleet is decimated. This is the missile truck doctrine. It leverages the massive lifting capacity of a 60-year-old airframe and marries it to the bleeding-edge lethality of 21st-century autonomous munitions. And by launching from Australia, the B-52 can execute this doctrine repeatedly, relentlessly, without ever exposing the bomber itself to enemy fire. The mathematics of distance. The hardware is terrifying, but the true brilliance of the Tindal deployment relies entirely on the map. In the grand strategy of the Indo-Pacific, geography is the ultimate weapon, and Australia holds the high ground. Let us revisit the vulnerability of Guam. Guam is roughly 3,000 kilometers from the Chinese coast. As we established, that places it firmly inside the kill zone of the DF-26 intermediate-range ballistic missile. Now look at RAAF Base Tindal. Tindal is located approximately 4,500 to 5,000 kilometers from the primary missile launch sites on the Chinese mainland. That simple mathematical addition of 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers completely shatters the Chinese targeting calculus. At that distance, Tindal is currently beyond the effective, reliable operational range of the vast majority of China's conventional land-based ballistic missile arsenal, including the standard variants of the DF-26. The Chinese Communist Party spent 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars optimizing their rocket force to destroy American bases in the first and second island chains. By moving the bombers to the Northern Territory, the United States has effectively stepped backwards, out of the spotlight, rendering the Chinese A-2/AD missile umbrella largely irrelevant to the survival of the strategic bomber fleet. To strike Tindal, Beijing cannot simply push a button and launch a volley of land-based missiles. They are forced to engage in a logistical and tactical nightmare. The continental fortress. If China wants to destroy the B-52s parked in the Australian outback, they have to traverse a continent. They would have to rely on their fleet of H-6K strategic bombers carrying long-range air-launched cruise missiles, or they would have to utilize scarce, highly valuable nuclear attack submarines to launch land attack cruise missiles from the Indian Ocean or the Timor Sea. This introduces a level of friction and vulnerability that Beijing deeply fears. An island like Guam sits alone in the open ocean. A continent like Australia is a fortress. If Chinese H-6 bombers attempt to fly far enough south to launch cruise missiles at Tindal, they must first run a terrifying gauntlet. They must fly through the contested airspace of Southeast Asia. Long before they even reach their launch points, they will be detected by the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN. Australia's massive over-the-horizon radar system that bounces radio waves off the ionosphere, capable of detecting aircraft movements thousands of kilometers to the north. Once detected by JORN, the Chinese bombers would be intercepted by the Royal Australian Air Force. They would be engaged by F-35A stealth fighters launching from forward operating bases in Darwin and Tindal. Any cruise missiles that somehow managed to be launched would then have to penetrate the layered ground-based air defenses surrounding the base, including advanced NASAMS batteries. Striking Tindal is not a simple missile shot. It requires a massive, highly complex, deeply vulnerable expeditionary strike package that the Chinese military has never successfully demonstrated the capability to execute. Australia provides the ultimate geographic armor, strategic depth. By acting as the unsinkable aircraft carrier at the bottom of the world, Australia provides the United States with a sovereign sanctuary. It is a staging ground where logistics can be stockpiled, aircraft can be maintained, and aircrews can rest without the constant, looming anxiety of a preemptive ballistic missile strike. Conclusion. The $1.5 billion militarization of RAAF Base Tindal represents the death of complacency in the Western Alliance. For too long, the United States believed that its historical island bases in the Pacific were permanent monuments to its power. But as the authoritarian regimes modernized their arsenals, those monuments became targets. The Guam Killer proved that the West could no longer rely on static lines on a map. The deployment of the B-52 Stratofortress to the Australian outback is a masterstroke of geopolitical judo. It takes the perceived weakness of the B-52, its age and its massive radar cross-section, and turns it into a strength by transforming the aircraft into an unreachable high-altitude missile truck. It takes the perceived weakness of Australia, its immense isolation and tyranny of distance, and weaponizes it, turning that distance into an impenetrable shield that the Chinese rocket force cannot crack. When Beijing looks at the map of the Pacific today, they no longer just see an American fleet they can push out of the South China Sea. They see a massively reinforced, heavily industrialized continental fortress looming in the south. They see a sanctuary capable of launching swarms of stealth cruise missiles with total impunity. The B-52 Fortress in the Northern Territory proves that the free world will not be geographically boxed in. We will simply move the starting line, increase the range, and ensure that the apex predators of the sky are always waiting, fully armed, just out of reach. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that moving strategic bombers to Australia provides enough deterrence against China, or does the West need to develop new, stealthier bombers to penetrate Chinese airspace directly? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay out of range, and we'll see you in the next one.